Welcome back, casual gardeners. I am finally at a point in my garden where I can start laying out the perennial crops that I want to grow. I love perennial crops because you can plant them once and harvest year after year. Today's video is about grapes. Once you've decided that grapes are what you want to grow, your next step is to choose your variety of grapes. Are you going to be growing your vine as kind of a privacy enhancer up a fence just to block someone's view? Are you growing it for the fruit? Do you want table grapes? Do you want to do homemade wine? Do you want to make jams and jellies? Different grapes are going to be better for different uses. Of course, if you're just growing your grapes for privacy, get whatever's cheapest, right? Next, you want to consider your climate. Different grapes varieties are going to do better in different climates. This is where the USDA hardiness zone really comes in with perennials. You want to make sure that the variety that you get is going to perform well in your climate and then also with your growing season. So if you have a shorter growing season, mine is only 156 days long on average, you're going to want to get grapes that are harvested earlier. Remember that the USDA hardiness zone is about the average low temperature, and that means you're going to have some below average temperatures. So as you're selecting your grape varieties, well, I like to choose something that is 2 or more hardiness zones lower than mine. So I want to be able to grab USDA zone 3 or 4 hardiness grape varieties, because that just ensures that no matter what's going on with my crazy winters, I'm going to get some grapes. Finally, you're going to want to consider, are there any diseases that are prevalent where I'm growing my grapes? Some areas struggle with Pierce's disease. Some areas struggle with downy mildew or powdery mildew. If you have these diseases prevalent in your area, you can probably find some grape varieties that are going to be resistant to them, and resistant grapes will just make your life so much better. This is a Swenson red grape. It was developed for short season growers in Minnesota and will typically ripen early in September. It's hardy down to zone 4 and grows medium to large, sweet red grapes. I'm going to get really good table grapes from this. I can make jams and jellies. Also, if I wanted to try making a little wine, I could use these grapes for wine. Both of the grape varieties that I chose for my garden are self-fruitful, so they don't actually need a pollinator. This tiny thing is a marquee grape. I got bare root and planted right here. It's a lot smaller, and I actually paid twice as much for it. Marquee grapes are a large green grape that is hardy down to USDA zone 5. It also ripens in early September, which means I've got a pretty reasonable chance of a harvest before my first frost. This is another seedless grape that is best as a table grape. You can use it in jellies or eat it as part of a dessert. These guys ripen pretty sweet, but if you like a tartar grape, you can give them another 5 to 7 days after ripening and they'll get a little tart, which is kind of cool. Once you've figured out what variety you want to grow, choose where you're going to grow it. Ideally, you want to grow it somewhere with free draining soil and full sun, but we don't all grow under ideal conditions. Just keep in mind that if your soil doesn't drain freely, you're going to have issues with root rot. If you're not in full sun, you might have smaller harvests of smaller grapes because your grapes are using that sunlight to make the sugar and make the fruit itself. So, it directly correlates. The grapevine is going to need regular watering for the first year, but they're actually pretty drought tolerant once they're established. The best time to plant your grapes is going to depend on your climate. In a colder climate like mine, it's best to plant your grapes in the spring because that gives them the whole spring, summer, fall to get their roots established and be ready for the most punishing time of our year, which is the winter. However, if you're in a warmer climate, the most punishing time of your year is going to be your summer. And for that reason, it's better to plant your grapes in probably the mid to late fall. That gives them fall, winter, spring to get their roots established so that they can drink deeply and get through that hot, hot summer. A lot of different ways to prune grapes, but best practices are pretty much all the same for year 1. And we're focusing on year 1 in this video. I am going to show you year 2 next year, but I just planted my grapes. I don't have the growth for that yet. So on year 1, our goal is just to establish a straight trunk. This is going to be the permanent part of our grapevine, and to help encourage deep, healthy root growth. That's just all we want from year 1. If you get any flowers, pick them off. We don't want to waste that energy on fruit this year. So this year, when we plant our grapes for year 1, we're going to go through and cut off all of the lateral growth. We just want to encourage straight up. And we're going to keep it growing straight up until it reaches the height, the maximum height that we want for wherever we're growing it. If you have an 8-foot tall arbor and you want to grow your grapes over the arbor, that means you want to go 8 feet straight up before you do anything else. I've got a about 6-foot tall fence I'm growing my grapes up, so we're going to go 6 feet straight up before I do anything else. Grapes can put on quite a lot of growth during a season, so it's not as big a deal as it sounds like. Once your grapevine has reached the height that you want, look for nodes so that anywhere it would grow a leaf or a bud, each of those nodes has the potential to grow into a branch. And now we do want to encourage lateral branching. So we're going to top that vine right above a node, and then we're going to try to encourage and keep lateral growth where we want it. If any vines are coming off where we don't want them, if they're nearby, we can train them to where we want them. If they're far away, we can just lop those off as well. And that's all the pruning we're doing in year 1. Because we're doing extensive training this year, we're not following any seasonality rules when it comes to pruning. But moving forward, the ideal is to do all of our pruning in early spring before the vine has broken dormancy. Expect year after year to prune off 80 to 90% of the previous year's growth if you're going to grow kind of the way professional growers do. So it's a lot. This is not your neighbor's grapevine that just travels along a 40-foot section of fence and has a few small grapes. We're growing for fruit, unless you're not. And the reason that we want to cut off all of that growth is that you're going to get the largest, sweetest grapes closest to that main trunk. I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense. If you have to transport that sugar farther to get to the fruit, less of that sugar is going to make it to your fruit. So, I mean, ideally, we're not going to want to branch very much if we're growing for fruit. You may choose to enhance your grapevine's growth for the first few years by giving it some mild fertilization. But once your grapes are established, you may be able to grow them year after year with no further fertilization at all. Just keep an eye on your grape plant, learn to read it. Once you know what is normal for it, and as you gain more skill in diagnosing nutrient deficiencies, it's perfectly fine to just give it what it's asking for and nothing else once it's established. Grapevines prefer warm soil and full sun. So this is a plant that you actually aren't going to want to mulch, at least not in the spring. If you mulch your grape, you are probably going to slow its growth early in the season because that soil isn't warming up as fast. So if you must mulch, pull it back in the spring. But this is one that you really ideally shouldn't mulch. And that's going to make weed control a little bit more complicated around your grapes. You don't want to spray any herbicides at the base of your grape because if it makes it to a root, well, you've killed your whole vine, and all of that work is down the tubes. The best way to control weeds around your grapevine is to just lightly cultivate that top inch of soil, probably with like a hula hoe or whatever silly name you use for it. Make sure you don't cultivate too deeply though, or you start damaging your grape roots. Established vines are not going to be very thirsty. They just need like half an inch to an inch of water every week, which is hardly any. As your grapevine becomes established during the first year, expect to give it a little bit more water. Use a watering system that is going to prevent water splashing up onto the leaves. Wherever you're growing, your grapes are going to be more susceptible to powdery mildew than a lot of other plants. And water on the leaves is really just kind of asking for powdery mildew. So this is something that if you can drip irrigate down at the base of your vine, That is ideal. You're also going to want to avoid sprinkler spray onto your grapevines, which probably is problematic for a lot of us because we rely on spray sprinklers for our lawns. So good luck. If you can avoid sprayed water on your grapes, that is just ideal. In the fall, you actually are going to want to reduce water to your grapevines because that signals to the vine that it is time to get ready for dormancy. So if you have a means to shut off watering to your grapes, specifically in the fall, you're going to want to do that. That extra signal to go dormant is just going to help your plant be ready when the first frost hits. Because plants, they don't do anything fast. There are a lot of details that I didn't cover in this video, but if you're thinking about grapes and you're a first-time grape grower, this is probably enough information to get you started. Now, as I'm making this video, I need about 100 more subscribers to get monetized. So help me out. Just hit subscribe. Subscribe to my channel, hit the little bell if you want to see what I'm making next. Monday the 27th is my next video, and it is going to be about encouraging pollinators in your garden. Thank you for joining me here in my garden today. I hope you have a wonderful time in your own.